So thank you everybody for joining us today. This is our first time doing a webinar, so we might run into some little technical uh, snafus here and there. But we're going to talk about, well, first of all, I think most of you know me, some of you might not. I'm Ben Vinar, so and I don't even know what my title is anymore. I think it's changed. It was Communications Specialist for Bloomington Community Access Television. I think it's changing to Video Production Specialist now. And then I'll let Dan introduce himself.
Yes, I see a few familiar faces here. My name is Dan Carpenter, and I'm the Community TV Administrator for SWTV. I'm located over there in Edina. And let's see, I've been on the job for about 6 months, but looking to share quite a bit of TV production knowledge with everyone and kind of share some ideas.
Yeah. So today, obviously, we're going to be talking about producing from home. As you all know, there's a pandemic going on. So most public access stations are not open right now, or they're doing, starting to kind of slowly reopen and things like that. And so we just wanted to, Dan and I are still able to play back shows. So if you've got new material that you are creating, we want to see it. So please send that to us and we'll be more than happy to play it on our channels. But in order to create new stuff, you got to know how to do that. So we're going to go over just some tips for different ways that you can keep producing from home. And again, if you have questions along the way, either write them down. We'll have Q&A at the end, or type them into the chat, and we'll go through those. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is doing online interviews. And I picked out sort of 5 kind of main things. There's a lot of them out there these days. One that I left out the list is Microsoft Teams, and there's some others out there as well. But these are kind of the bigger ones that a lot of people are using these days to do online interviews or like group meetings, things like that. We're using WebEx right now. This is what the city of Bloomington prefers to use. And I use WebEx now multiple times a week to do different staff meetings and things like that. But this is the first time that I've ever done any kind of like webinar presentation through it. So first up, Skype, and I'm just going to kind of run through the lists of these pros and cons, and Dan and I might kind of touch on a few of the points, but just for timing's sake, we're going to kind of go through this a little bit quickly. So Skype, it's been around for a long time. A lot of you have probably used it before. One of the things that's really nice about it is it's free for anybody to use. It's really pretty simple to set up and use. You can easily share this. This is something I just found out, which is kind of nice, is it actually saves the recording. If you use the recording function within Skype, it saves it to the chat. And what's nice about that is you can then just send it off to the other people who are on the call with you. So they have a copy of it. But then if you need to save it for yourself for editing purposes, then you have to go into the chat and download it from the chat. So it doesn't save directly to your computer. It tends to have higher quality video than Zoom, which I'll talk about Zoom next. It's a great option for just like one-on-one interviews, and I'll talk about why it's not such a great option for doing multiple people. The one thing that I found out that's really nice about it is it has a pretty large time limit. So you can do 100 hours per month with no more than 10 hours per day and a limit of 4 hours per individual video call. And that's a pretty big deal, because a lot of the free options for like Zoom and WebEx and things like that, it's usually under an hour that you have for a call. And then you can also send files right through Skype, which is nice, but it does have a size limit of 300 megabytes. So if you need to send like pictures to somebody or something like that while you're on a call with them, you can do that pretty easily. Some of the cons, it's pretty easy to hack Skype, and Dan has his own experience with that. He can
Yeah,
touch
I
on.
used to work with the program quite a bit, actually. I worked with it for years to do interviews, and you know, spam was a big issue. You'd get dozens of spam friend requests, so to speak, and then the hacking was also a big drawback for me. So I stopped using the program actually, but I think its original intended use was those free long distance phone calls and video calls. But it's good to have it on here as an option because, like Ben said, it is free. Anything else you want to say about the cons?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, the recording to the chat is both a pro and a con. Part of the reason why I put it as a con is because it doesn't automatically save it to your computer. Um, the connection tends to be less reliable than Zoom does. None of these are like great. You've probably noticed if you used any of these, but it does tend to lag or freeze more frequently. And the one thing that I think is a con to Skype is you actually have to call somebody instead of like setting up a meeting and just sending a link out to everybody like I did for this. You have to call them. And then to be able to add more people to that call, you have to call one person first, and then you have to add participants
Mm-hmm.
after that. And you do have to add them ahead of time too. They have to be in like your list of contacts. And then the share screen. So most of these options you can share your screen like I'm doing right now. But what I did is I was able to just share only the PowerPoint. So you guys should only be seeing the PowerPoint right now. But when you share the screen with Skype, it actually shares your entire screen. So if you have like a really cluttered desktop, or maybe you have like personal email up you don't want people to see or something like that, it's gonna show all of that to everybody. So you have to make sure before you share your screen, you've got the window up that you want people to see. All right, so Zoom. This one is more commonly used today. I'm sure you've all heard about Zoom. It really exploded when the pandemic started. Schools are using it. All sorts of businesses are using it. It's really probably the most popular option today for doing group calls like this. The recording in it will follow whichever view you are on. So if you're an active speaker view or grid view, things like that, it will follow what you are doing as the host, as the person who's recording. And I'll talk about why I think that is nice once I move on to WebEx. It tends to have the most reliable connection, and I say minimal lag or freezing because again, all of these they can freeze up. And I've heard conflicting things. I've heard that it has the best connection, and I've heard that it doesn't. So who knows? But it really depends on your internet connection. You can share your screen just like you can with WebEx. With the share screen function in Zoom, you can also select which thing you want to share. It has some features in it like whiteboard, polling, and remote control. So what those are is whiteboard allows all the participants to like draw on this, basically just this white screen. So if you're needing to kind of like jot down ideas together or something like that, I don't know exactly what you would use it for, but I guess it could be useful for businesses or something like that. Polling, pretty straightforward. You can send a poll out to all participants. And then remote control allows you to actually pass the remote control over to another participant so they can go through slides and things like that. The host can mute all guests or mute them individually. Same with WebEx. And then one thing that's kind of fun with Zoom is they somewhat recently started doing these custom backgrounds. So that picture that you see there, most of the people on that call have a custom background, and it'll ask you if you have a green screen like Brent does. And obviously, green screen will give you a more kind of a crisp background and everything, but it will do those custom backgrounds even without a green screen. It doesn't always work real great. It's kind of funny sometimes, but if you move like too far away, like suddenly your face will disappear or something like that. But it's kind of a fun thing to do, and it's nice if you don't want people to see everything that's behind you. some cons to it. The paid versions are kind of expensive. I doubt most people on this call are going to use the paid versions of these, because they're really made. The paid versions are made more for businesses and stuff who have like a lot of team members and things like that and need more features. And then you've probably heard of Zoom bombing. That term was even on like the news and stuff like that. When Zoom first started exploding at the beginning of the pandemic, it was pretty vulnerable to hackers. People were hacking in and sharing inappropriate content and things like that. Zoom has since upped their game and upped their security quite a bit. So I don't think it's as much of an issue anymore, but I know that people are still worried about that. And then the free version only has a 40-minute time limit with 3 or more participants. I don't know if you have just like 2 people. Yes, Jeff. Jeff just asked if that's why we muted him. Yes. I don't know if you're just like one-on-one with somebody with Zoom, if there's any time limit. It might be unlimited. I'm not sure. But if you have 3 or more, then you're limited to 40 minutes, which is still, a pretty long time. Especially
I was going to chime in real
Yeah.
quick. As far as doing interviews with Zoom, there's one feature that's really great for meetings, which is you have to hold down the space bar to unmute yourself, which is really good for eliminating that background noise when a lot of participants are in the room. But if you're trying to interview someone one-on-one, they may forget to do that, and it's just an extra thing that they're thinking about. So that's a feature you'd want to have turned off. So just something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. Brent I just saw he mentioned in the chat that you can just sign back in after the 40-minute time limit. You can just sign back in with the same link and just keep it going. Obviously, if you're trying to do like a full-on meeting or something like that and you're recording it, then you'd have to like piece it together. Not a huge deal, but it's nice to know that. I didn't know that. And they were for a while, I don't know if they still are, but they were eliminating that 40-minute time limit for a while too. But it seemed to not work for everybody. I was on some calls that cut off and other ones that just kept going, and it never showed the little countdown saying that it was going to end soon or anything. So one other thing I just thought of with Zoom that's kind of cool for, especially if you have a lot of people, is they have like this hand raising function. So you can, down on like the bottom menu, you can like raise your hand and it'll show up to the host showing that somebody's like, saying, I have a question type of thing. And then that way you can say, yes, do you want to comment on this? And then they, can unmute themselves at that time instead of just talking over each other. Because that's one thing with these is it's very easy to talk over one another. All right. So WebEx. So again, this is what we are using right now. The city of Bloomington prefers it because it was supposed to be more secure. Maybe it is still more secure than Zoom, but I think Zoom is catching up. So one thing that's nice is the free version. You can have up to 100 participants. You can do both private chat and group chat, which you can do in Zoom too. Actually, again, the host can mute all guests. The meeting continues even if the host loses connection. Which is nice. If I disappear, then Dan could take over. So it also has the share screen function, and again, it just shares whatever app you choose to share. It's pretty easy to invite participants, as you guys all saw. I just forwarded an email with the link, and you just clicked on join. Pretty easy. The free version, you can meet for up to 50 minutes. I put that as a pro because it's 10 minutes more than Zoom. It's, 10 minutes more isn't a lot, but it's something. So, and then it also has the whiteboard, polling, and remote control options, which I'll be handing the remote control over to Dan in a little bit. And then you can record to your computer and or the cloud. The cloud, I believe you have to have a paid version, but I'll kind of talk about why the cloud recording I wasn't a huge fan of when I did an interview earlier this week. And then again, it's known to be more secure than Zoom, but Zoom, they added the waiting room thing, which means the host has to allow people to join. And then they also added passwords as well. So their security is, I'm guessing, is probably just as good as WebEx these days. Again, the paid versions are expensive, and it's so the thing with these paid versions is the cost is per month per host. So it's a recurring payment and it's per host. So if you have a team and you've got multiple managers that all need to be a host at some point, you're going to pay per host monthly. So that could add up. Opening a presentation also opens the chat window by default, although I don't know if it did that just now when I started the presentation.
It's not always consistent, so that's one of the cons.
One of the cons, yeah.
So if you're recording an interview, you wouldn't want the little chat bar to pop up, and that could kind of ruin your visuals for your recording.
Right, yeah. And I think it did. Dan and I did a test a couple days ago, and I think it did open the chat window when we started the presentation. So the recording views, this is actually for just the cloud version. I put this in here before I had the option to record to my computer. So when I first started using WebEx for doing interviews and stuff, I only had the option, since I'm using a Mac, I don't know why this wasn't an option for Macs, but they only had the option to record in the cloud. And it was limited, so I could only do thumbnails, which had like people up along the top, and then whoever was talking down, bigger, or only active speaker, which shows whoever's talking through the whole screen, or content only. And I was wanting it to follow what I was doing because I was interviewing 4 people and I was switching back and forth between the active speaker and the grid view. And I was switching to the grid view because I wanted to see all 4 of them talking at once. Dan's reminding me of the time. Yeah, we better get going. But anyway, so now I'm able to record to my computer. I had IT set that up, and it seems to be a better option. The connection tends to be less reliable than Zoom. The audio sometimes lags when people start talking, and so then it causes people to talk over one another. And then some features can be more difficult to find in WebEx than like Zoom. All right, so Google Meet, I haven't used this before. I'll go over it quickly. It actually seems pretty nice. It's free for anybody to use as long as you have a Google account, like a Gmail account. Yes. And then the advanced features that are normally only available for the paid options are free right now through September 22nd, or September 2020, I should say. And some of those advanced features, you can have up to 250 people, which is a lot. And then you can live stream up to 100,000 users within your domain. The recording is saved to Google Drive, so it doesn't save locally. It only saves in the cloud. Brent just asked if it's different than Google Hangouts. Hangouts is changing over to Meet. So it used to be Google Hangouts and it was more limited. Then it switched to Google Hangouts Meet, and now it's changing to just Google Meet. So good question. And then there's no time limit with up to 100 users on the call. So I found it to be, I kind of tested it out the other day, and I found it to be much cleaner and a much simpler layout than other options, which I thought was really nice. The one thing they just added within the past few weeks is noise cancellation, which is cool. I'm not really hearing any background noise from Dan right now, so WebEx might have a similar thing, but Google's apparently works really well. Even if you're like eating food, apparently it can like cut out the sound of you eating food. It integrates really easily with other Google apps, so like Google Calendar, Gmail, things like that. It's really easy to send invites to people. It's very simple to host and join it as long as you have a Google account. It claims to be more secure because it works entirely within a web browser. So there's no like downloading of apps, which apparently are more vulnerable to hackers. And there was other reasons that one of them off the top of my head was that it has a more of a unique link that it sends to people, so it's harder for hackers to figure out what that link is. So Google claims it's more secure than any other option, but I don't know for sure if that's true or not. Some cons: there's no extra features like the whiteboard, remote control, things like that, which, if you're just doing an interview with somebody, not a huge deal. And you don't have to have a Google account to participate, but if you have a different kind of email address, then the host has to grant you access to it. And you can only host a meeting if you have a Google account. So I know a lot of businesses are using Google or using Gmail as like kind of their main emails nowadays anyway. So I think it's a nice option for businesses. And then you have to be signed into your Google account on a mobile device to be able to join, which isn't a big deal if you know how to do that. But and then recording only captures the active speaker and anything that's presented, so it won't capture like grid view or any other kind of views. So I put that under the cons for that reason. And then Google Duo, I'll just talk really quickly. This is really made more for one-on-one video calls, especially with like a phone. So you can have more people on the call. It's kind of like Skype where you have to add more people later. But it's really built more for just one-on-one type of things. And then it doesn't have any kind of recording built into it. So you do have to use a screen recording option on your computer because you can use it either on a mobile device or a computer, but you'd have to use the screen recording thing that's built into your device to be able to record it. Just for the sake of timing, I'll keep going quickly. So the takeaway with all of these, none of these options are 100% foolproof. They've all got their faults. They depend heavily on internet connection and devices used by all participants. So if somebody's, having an issue connecting their audio, like Patty was earlier, or if somebody has a slow internet connection, it's going to depend on all of those things to be able to have a nice, clean meeting or interview. Try to use a hardline connection if possible. I'm on a hardline right now. I don't know if I've been skipping to any of you or anything like that or lagging, but it seems to be much better if you're able to connect your computer to a hardline. And then Zoom, WebEx, and Google Meet they're really better for groups. So if you're going to do like a group interview or something like that, they're really built more for that. And then again, all of these options have pros and cons, as you just saw with the list. So just find what works for you. Test them out and figure out which one might work better for what your purpose is.
And I'll chime in here with one other piece that may help someone who's doing a one-on-one interview. I used to use Skype all the time for interviews as a reporter, and these were very important interviews because you only had one shot to get it right. So what we would do is, in addition to the video chat where you're gesturing with your hands, so there's that value in being able to see someone far away, we would record myself, and the person I was interviewing would record themselves with a phone. And that was a better video quality. So we were still doing the interview over Skype, but the video we were using for broadcast came from a phone. And so, of course, that would have to be sent after the interview was done. But if you're looking for a better picture for a broadcast, then that's a really good way to go about it.
Yeah, it's a nice tip. I never would have even thought about that before Dan mentioned it. And kind of, on that note, most webcams, even if you've got a newer computer, the webcams really aren't great quality for both audio and video a lot of the time. So having good light helps. I have an extra light pointed at me right now because I'm in a fairly dark office. And then, if you're able to connect a better microphone, that helps as well. All right, and then at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dan. So let me make sure I remember how assign.
While you're doing that, I'll go ahead and get started here. So this part of the presentation is about setting up a home studio with very little equipment and really on a small budget, and still making it look really nice. Since the COVID-19 pandemic has forced many producers to change the way they're recording shows, SWTV has started receiving more and more shows recorded from mobile devices, iPads, iPhones, things like that. So this portion of
Oops.
the presentation will
Ah,
hit on, you're good.
trying to go back and it's going forward.
We'll hit on how you can set up a really nice studio for yourself. We're going to start with a simple setup, and our own producer, Christy Zilka, is actually going to do the explanation. I thought, who better to explain a simple studio setup than a producer who hadn't done this before? And so Ben, or actually, yep, let's go ahead and play that video, and she can explain the process.
Hello, fellow producers. My name is Christy Zilka, and I'm an exercise instructor. Actually teach classes in person at senior centers, community centers, different facilities all over the city. And unfortunately, when the virus hit, it obviously shut all of that down, and very difficult to get to the senior population who are my clients, my buddies, my exercise group that I deal with. So I had to come up with another way to actually interact with them, and it was Dan who brought the idea to light and wanted to know if I'd be interested in making some videos. Well, the only other time I worked with Dan was when I went to the senior center and he brought all of his stuff, and all I had to do was do my stuff, and it was very easy. Well, come to find out, what he was talking about is that I had a video myself and talked to the video like I'm my phone, I should say, like I'm talking to you, like I'm talking to the class, which took some time to get used to. So anyway, he asked me to come up with a couple pointers or things that I encountered as a novice, never ever doing anything like this before. Some of the things that I encountered that might help you in your journey. So the one thing, most important thing, I guess, is what's your background going to be? What does it look like? Now I can tell you there might be all hell letting loose in front of me, but whatever's going on behind me and what you're seeing is what your customer and your viewership is going to look at. So I'd like to kind of clean things up a little bit. Now this right here, from what you see, is not clean by any means, but I wanted to show you how it looks before I actually come up with the encapsulated background that I'm looking for. So the first thing that I do is anything that I'm going to be talking about that day, like right now, or if I'm going to be doing a video for Dan, I put all of my cheat sheets right in front of me. Now normally when I set up my phone and the tripod, which I'll show you here in a minute, obviously that doesn't show that, okay? It goes from a point that I'm looking to show and then going back. So the good news is you can hide all this stuff that's in front of you that can be your, talking points, your cheat sheet, whatever you want to call it, your pictures, however you want to deliver your message. So that's how I do it. I set it up front, nobody sees it but me. I'm looking down, but I look back up again. And I guess probably the other thing that was a little difficult to get used to in the beginning, but now I think I'm a little bit better at it, is looking at the eye of the iPhone. Right now I'm actually doing this from my iPad because I'm going to be showing you the iPhone and how I did that. But just looking at that, and in my mind's eye, I see people. So you're looking at me, but I'm looking at you too, because when I'm talking, it's like I am talking to another person. So that eye right there are your eyes. So hopefully that makes sense and that you'll become comfortable with that as well. So again, any papers or anything that you have that you need to deliver your message, put it in the front, and then when you actually get yourself centered on what it's going to look like, make sure that they're out of view. I have these two pieces right next to me. And really what I do is I use these as my props, where I stack them on top of each other, and that's what I video off of. So right now I'm doing it a little bit differently, but because I'm working from a different machine. But so find in your house, your office, your whatever, different pieces that you can use to give you the height that you want and the scope that you're looking for. And these are mine. These two, and then if I need to go even a little bit higher, if I'm standing or whatnot, I would even go higher than that. So gather your props. The next thing is, this is really how I did my videos. I basically did, I think I'm at a total of 18 videos. So I did mine a little bit different in that I will say from video 1 to video 18, I became a little bit more comfortable with it, as anybody would. In the beginning it was scary, but as I went down the line and as I gained a little bit more confidence, it got easier. So what I did do is I then went back and redid video 1, and I think I redid video 2. Because if you redo your first couple of videos, if you have that opportunity, in my situation I did, then you can speak to what is coming because you've already done it. You know that the videos are already in the queue. Instead of doing your first one and thinking that you know what's going to be coming, but you haven't done the videos yet. So I recommend that. I felt really good redoing my first video. I don't know if it was night and day difference, but it made, it was more important to me. So if you can do that, do the same thing. So I use my iPhone. You can use any iPhone that you want, that you have. I actually have the 11. And this is key. This is crucial. So you want to have your tripod. I bought this at Target. I believe I paid under $30 for it. It actually, you put your phone right on here. So then this right here would set right on top of these two like stools. So up high. And I'm looking at the back of my phone the whole time. So these are the eyes I'm looking at while I'm delivering my message. So that's all you need is a good backdrop, good props, all of your cheat sheets in front of you, your iPhone, iPad would work as well because I'm doing this one on the iPad, and then your tripod. So listen, oh, and I can't forget, and my husband. My husband is my turner oner and turner offer, and he does a very good job. So anyway, thank you. Good luck, everybody. Hopefully these tips help. Oh, I didn't mention one of the most important things. Oh my goodness gracious! Before you do any videoing at all, put your phone on Do Not Disturb. I have had, I think, 3 different videos interrupted by a phone call or a text, and it automatically shuts down that video. Oh. So glad I remembered that one. Nothing is more maddening than to, get done with your video, think you're done with it, and then it's stalled after 6 minutes. So numero uno, take your phone, do not disturb, set it up. There you go, all set. Bye everybody, good luck.
So now I'm going to go over how you can get a formal interview style shot with your cell phone and have it look pretty good. So I did an interview in my living room last weekend. And here is the equipment I used. I used a nice tripod for my cell phone. It was about $80. And I got this one because it has a bubble level on it, so I can kind of see if my cell phone is perfectly horizontal. You can also get a perfectly fine tripod for $15 to $25. They have a lot of off-brand options out there. And as far as my phone, I have a Galaxy S9, but you can easily use an older phone, even older than that. I used an iPhone 6S. Right now they're selling for $130 used. They record in HD. They've got plenty of space. So that was a good option for me, but use what you have with you already. Now on to the next slide. Before you hit record on your video camera, make sure of a few things. Make sure that the recording resolution is set to HD. That will help you out. Pretty much all smartphones record in HD these days. Make sure the aspect ratio is 16:9 and not some strange ratio for Instagram or something like that. Also turn on tracking autofocus. You may decide to frame up your interview off center. That's how a lot of people like to frame their shots, but you don't want your cell phone focusing on the wall behind your subject. So tracking autofocus will keep track of someone's face and hopefully keep them in focus throughout the interview. Also, of course, storage is important. If you have a phone with one of those extra SD card slots, make sure you've got a lot of space on there. If you don't, if you've got an iPhone with an internal hard drive, maybe back up that phone, clear those old videos, and just make space for a very long clip, because your interview, who knows, might take 20 minutes or so, and you want to make sure that that will complete. Now for audio, we're not going with an expensive lavalier microphone or anything wireless. I decided to use the cord that came with one of my phones. It's one of those headsets that you can talk to people with and get clearer audio than just using a speakerphone on your phone. So if you don't have one of these, they're about 12 to 20 bucks online. If you've got an iPhone 7 or newer, you'll need one of those adapters to plug in one of these headsets into your phone. Those cost about $8. And you can see the picture on the left where I've used some tape to kind of move the earpiece out of the way a little bit, because the microphone portion, of course, is where you see that plus and minus sign for the volume. So that's the important part there. An alternative to that is you can plug in what we like to call a shotgun microphone to your phone. And this is the same kind of connection, and this would just mount next to your phone on that tripod, and that is more directional audio. So hopefully you won't get as much traffic noise if you're near a busy street, and you'll just get clearer audio if you're speaking from 3-4 feet away or more. Those cost around 35 bucks or so. Here's what I did. I took that headphone cord and I taped it to my subject under her clothing. Well, the cord is under her clothing, but the actual microphone itself is exposed. I didn't want any clothing to rub on that. I didn't want any audio issues. And you can see that I've used just the regular voice app, like voice recorder app on the phone. Samsung has it, Apple has it. I think pretty much every phone has some version of this. And after you've recorded your audio, it gives you a file which then you can email to yourself or share and put that into your editing software. It's important that you record a short clip of your subject talking and then play that back so you can hear if there are any errors, anything rubbing, you're hearing some kind of crackling. Maybe your headset isn't great, maybe it was damaged. You never know. This is a good time to find out before you actually do the interview. And as for lighting, I ended up just using 2 desk lamps. A lot of us have those floor lamps. Those are handy as well. But a desk lamp you'll want to elevate to a height a little bit above your subject. You don't want them looking straight into the light. So keep that in mind. But an important factor here is to use the correct light bulbs, because light bulbs come in all these different colors, and I'll explain that here in a second. So light has a different temperature depending on the source. So when it's sunny outside, it's measured, the color temperature is measured as 5,500 Kelvin. When the clouds roll over, that goes up to 6,000 Kelvin. You get into a really shady spot, it looks more bluish. You get to 7,500. You can see where this is going. Light inside is oftentimes warmer. So 2,800 Kelvin is what that is measured at. And it's important to know this because you want to try and match the light that's coming into the room already, or maybe you're able to take advantage of light coming through the window. You want to be able to match the color of that light and not mix that color with a different color. So how do you know what the color of the light is outside? Well, one trick is to just use Google. Say, what is the color temperature on a sunny day? Or what is the color temperature on a cloudy day? And you'll get an answer there. As you can see, you can find the color temperature of your light at the base. Right here, I've circled it in this slide. This LED light is 5,000 Kelvin, so it's a little more daylight than your typical warm home light. And I chose this intentionally to match the light that was coming in from outside. Again, these are really cheap. I think they're $1 a piece at like Home Depot or Costco. Very cheap. Now the wattage of these LED lights are not great. 10 watts, it's not super bright. So I did have to place this lamp pretty close to my subject. An important factor is once you remove that lampshade, of course, you want to block the light from hitting your camera because that can cause some issues with lens flaring. It can really take away from your shot. So I'll show you what I did here. Here's an old piece of plywood that I propped up to block that light from hitting my camera. You can see that on the tripod. And you can see I've elevated that lamp up onto a stool, and that camera is elevated on top of several games I just had lying around. So you just use what you have. Here's a top-down view. You can see the subject is pretty much facing the other chair where I was sitting, and you see the second lamp on the left-hand side there. And the windows are also helping with a little bit of backlight and side light. I also didn't want the window directly behind my subject because that can really make her look dark compared to the light that's coming in from behind her. So keep that in mind as well. And, tidy things up in the background, make things look nice. And here's another reminder to check that audio before you start recording. You may have to unplug her microphone, put in your own headsets, and play that back. Also, double check the framing. When people realize that they're about to be recorded on camera, they go from slouching usually to sitting up straight, and that can mess up the framing. You might actually end up cutting off the top of their head in the frame. So look for that before you get going, and then you're ready. Hit record. Here is a very short clip of the interview with first my question being asked using the microphone on the phone that is recording the video. And then she answers using the audio from the voice recording app on a different phone, which is seated behind her. You recently applied for a job with a major airline. That must have been a high-pressure situation. What advice would you give someone going into a similar situation?
Do your research beforehand. There's a wealth of information out there on YouTube, on their company websites, on social media even.
As you can hear, the audio is much better than just hitting record and using the audio from across the room. And that's what we want to go for. We want something that's a little bit more directional. And this is not a perfect situation. You can hear that the audio is a little compressed. This is a smaller file that we're recording here. But this whole setup did not cost very much money. So if you're just trying to find a solution to getting a better interview with your cell phone, this is a really good way to go about it. Now I'm going to show you what you can do with multiple cell phones. So a few years back, my aunt asked me if I would record her husband doing his pottery work. This was an anniversary gift for him. And at the time, I didn't have a bunch of cameras or fancy gear, but I did have a drawer full of old iPhone 4s. And they all had cracked screens or something wrong with them. But they would power on, they worked. What I did was I cleared those, and I used those as multiple angles for this 25-minute show, I suppose. And I just wanted you to see what's possible if you use editing software to sync the audio and the video, and you're switching between different angles. I'll only play a minute or so of this, but you can find the link for the full 25 minutes in the email that you'll get after this presentation.
So I'm going to do a lot of chattering here. I'll start with this one. Find a center to hold it down. My finger will hold it steady while it goes full speed, and you know, this is a point, so you just look to where the how do you say, the tiny point that isn't moving, everything else is spinning around it, you know. And then you put this tool to it, and if you're a little bit off, you can adjust. So that's chattering, all different. Kind of get the right angle so that it catches and releases.
So there you go. You can see that I would switch between different cameras, and I didn't have tripods for all of them. So in one case, I ended up using a bag of pinto beans to stabilize one of the cell phones. And it actually worked out great because I wanted this really low angle of the spinning table there, but I didn't want, you know, a big tripod that's very obvious in the other shots, because I knew it was probably going to be in the shot. So the bag of pinto beans really helped me out in that situation. And I would say just get creative. There's a lot you can do.
All right, thanks, Dan. And then for the last part of the presentation, we wanted to just go over some editing software options for you to potentially get at home if you are wanting to continue producing and editing from home. So first up, we have Adobe Premiere Pro. This is what we use at BCAT. We have the Premiere Pro CS6 version. They are now on to Premiere Pro CC, which stands for Creative Cloud. And so it is a monthly subscription, but the thing that's really nice about it is it has a lot of professional features, and it upgrades all the time. So whenever Adobe pushes out any kind of new upgrades to Premiere, you will get those upgrades, those updates, and new features and things like that. But it does cost $21 a month, and that can work on PC or Mac. I recently heard about kind of a mobile version of a Premiere called Adobe Premiere Rush. That is only $10 a month, and it can work on a PC, a Mac, or like I said, a mobile. There's a mobile app version. It seems to be geared more towards social media, people who are YouTube creators and Instagram creators and stuff like that. But it is a cheaper, more scaled down version of Premiere if you want to give that a try. Pinnacle Studio is another one that's just a one-time payment of $60. I personally haven't used it, but it's something that you could check out for a pretty affordable price. DaVinci Resolve is a program that is free. It's actually created by Blackmagic, which they create cameras and all sorts of different things. But they have a professional editing platform called DaVinci Resolve. And it is free to download for either PC or Mac, but there is a paid version. I believe it's $300 one-time payment, and you just get some extra features and more professional features and stuff like that. Final Cut Pro X, that is the newest version of Final Cut. It is also a $300 one-time payment. The nice thing about that is it does update. You will get updates to it like you do with Premiere Pro, but you don't have to pay for it monthly. But it only works for Mac, so if you have a PC, you wouldn't be able to use Final Cut. And last up, we have iMovie, which is free, but it is a Mac-based program, so you do have to have a Mac computer. It usually comes on Mac for free when you buy a new Mac, or you can download it for free. And there are a lot of other options out there as well. You can check out our Facebook page. We posted an article with some other free platforms that you can check out and help you edit from home. And lastly, we just wanted to quickly talk about the setup that our producer Jeff Straight, he does the show Democratic Visions. He set up this neat little audio booth, voiceover booth at his house using an older DV camera and a Sony microphone that he hung up. It looks like he hung it up in his closet. And the reason why he did that is the clothes in your closet works as a sound dampener. So it's actually a good place to have a little makeshift voiceover booth if you want to do it from home. And then it looks like he has some hardware that he purchased to be able to capture that pretty easily to his computer. And then he just strips the audio off of it to use for his voiceovers. So nice job, Jeff. And that's all we have for you for our presentation for the Producing from Home webinar. We hope that you all learned something very valuable and you can use this information to continue creating community media from home. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Dan or myself, and we'd be happy to help you out as best as we can. Thanks so much for tuning in.